off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first order of business is the minutes, and they have been read and reviewed. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. An RDA for 195 Olympic Lane.
I used to read that, the legal lens, and then I sort of, okay. We just consider the matter open. Why am I looking at this and because I'm still in the drive. Okay, you can come up. So, if you recall, the homeowners here, who are also on the agenda in a little bit for a COC for their addition project that they did, we knew when they came before us then that there were some things done at the property, I guess it just says as-built plan, that weren't permitted or allowed, but also were not done by the homeowners. This included some lot clearing. We had aerials back when they filed, and we also knew that the deck that was out there hadn't been permitted. It also is like a stone underneath, kind of dug into the ground so that it's walkout. None of that was part of the original house plan or the historic aerials, but that dates back some time. Needless to say, it is out there, and it's 33 feet at its closest point, I believe, to the wetland. 50 feet. It is. It would be an exempt minor activity under the riverfront regulations. But that said, they have issues, it's rotting, and they need to replace it. So they would like to do that in kind, so I don't think the project itself warrants much in the way of erosion controls or anything like that, but I told them they should file so that this gets on the record as being a legal structure. So they're here tonight.
So two purposes then, rebuild the existing deck in kind and submit a record drawing reflecting the current as-built conditions?
The record, the drawing in front of you is the record drawing, and it won't change.
And so that can be used as?
This would just memorialize
Okay.
that it exists and that you've authorized its replacement, hence sort of authorizing its existence.
And the IDA plan shows 57.7 feet of distance from flag A9?
No, that's to the corner of the house. In their description, you'll see the distance to the corner of the deck, I think is it 33 and a half? I don't. Somewhere in here, I recall it saying what the
Okay.
distance to the house was.
It looks
I mean,
like,
to the deck.
yeah. They're not there's no waiver request.
Well,
There is
no,
kind
because
of.
it exists and they're replacing it in kind. I think when they built it, there would have needed to have been a waiver request, but that's not how this went. So
Okay,
it's in,
they didn't build it.
right.
Okay, all set. I'm all set. Yeah. No, I got you. I'm good.
I don't have a problem with that, but I would like, I'm sure we'll approve the waiver, but I think we clean it up so that there'd be no issue that there was a waiver, that it was in the river, the deck was in the riverfront for future,
It's not the riverfront that requires a waiver, it's the no-build zone.
the no,
I know
what's
it's
in the no
in here
bill?
somewhere that he documented, noted how far away it was.
What we're here, I think we should clean it up.
I have the,
So
you
that-
want me to give him the plan, I have the scale.
that, because we're saying that it needed a waiver, it didn't get one, because it was built by whoever. I think we should vote on a waiver, and then approve it as built. It's up to you, what do you think?
No, I have no objection. I just, what's in front of us is an in-kind replacement.
Right.
So, I mean,
Oh, yeah, the work ranges from 33 feet away from the wetland boundary to the southwest corner to 51 feet from the wetland boundary at the northwest corner.
okay, procedurally, Jen,
Yep.
or Amy, or anybody up there that wants to answer. Procedurally, it's an in-kind replacement of a deck that they didn't build. Does it require a waiver?
My thought was that, again, our policy has always been if it was put there legally in an area that was the 30, was in the no-build zone, it was grandfathered. But since it wasn't put there legally, is it grandfathered? How long have you owned the house? So they're not liable for the valuation anymore. So I think that, in a sense, that makes it legal, and that a waiver wouldn't be required at this point. But that's just me
Okay.
drawing some conclusions.
Nope, that's what we're looking for. I'm all set.
Doug? Motion?
What is it,
Just
98?
want to be clear, just in case there's a future activity by this owner or other owners, by that action, though, we're acknowledging the deck was there, even though we're not making a determination. We're acknowledging it was there, so the next application wouldn't be raising questions again, right? It should
Right,
be-
about the
should be-
legality of the
Right.
deck, right. We could put something, it'll be in the determination that this was not
think we
only
spell it
for the
right out.
reconstruction, but for the after-the-fact approval of the deck in its current location.
Yeah, just to make it less confusing in the future.
Yep.
Well, that's why I wanted to vote the waiver, so it was clean.
Yeah, clean.
So it's a negative number 2 for work in the riverfront and negative number 3 for work in the buffer
Yeah,
zone.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Get the gist of the vote.
So, yeah, the only conditions I would recommend is that all stockpiling and material storage be in the driveway, which they
Right.
have already proposed, and that there be a post-construction.
As amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. That's why, Jen, I spoke earlier to Amy about that when she gets plans, that we have a construction access and a stockpile on the plan, so we don't have, there's no doubt.
It's one of those things that probably should be updated on our checklist, too, at some
Okay.
point, because we always ask for it, but it's not on the checklist.
we
So I
Thank-
spoke with Christina, I
Oh.
spoke with Christina about stock, are you gonna have a dumpster? And you said that the contractor,
He wasn't sure. He was hoping he didn't have to be honest. He was
Yep.
kind of hoping he could just
Drive
put it in
it
a
in his
tractor
truck.
and drive it out
Yeah.
every day. Was kind
And
of his
Bill
goal.
did say that if he did, it would be in the driveway.
Yes.
Okay. All set. Thank you.
Santa, yes.
First, request to continue 242-1745, 350 Winthrop Ave.
Second.
All those in favor?
Continue to the 26th of June.
To the 26th. Amy, do you have any conversation with them?
I would make.
At some point, we should get in touch with them and find out what they're, because they keep, no information.
I told them
information.
if it goes beyond the next meeting, they probably should renotice. It's getting
At
to
the
be,
last meeting, I had raised the question about at least conveying to them the desire that, what I was looking for was to enclose the open ditch, basically redesign the project. Was that passed on to them, or?
yeah, I think they're aware of all the issues.
All right.
They were trying to address the snow stockpiling, but I don't know where they stand, but this has gone on long enough. They want to get back in here and give us some kind of presentation.
Yeah, I agree. There's been, 6 weeks anyways?
Oh, way more than that.
More than that?
2 months at least.
Yeah. So I'd like, it doesn't matter, but it's just, we got to keep these people moving, or we won't get what we want. So we vote on that, right? We had a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is 242-1753, 247 Chickering Road, Enterprise Bank.
So as you expected, the planning board closed and issued the final decision, and so now it's ready for you to close and issue.
And we had no issues other than waiting for them to close. Move that we close this decision.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is, over here, 242-1755 Ray Street.
So this is for permitting of the houses within the subdivision that you previously approved. I drafted the recommendations last night. Amy and plans this afternoon. As you'll hear shortly, this is for the lots that are within jurisdiction. The houses are larger than previously proposed, some of them by up to 500 square feet larger. You'll hear also that to compensate for that, they're proposing increased roof infiltration. Most of the driveways account for impervious area reduction, although slightly less than what is proposed in the houses. Some of my other comments are that there are no pertinent utilities shown, no AC units, no generators, no any other things they might want out there, no bulkheads. So the commission's, some of these lots are tight, some of them aren't, but those kind of things should be on there. Landscaping is also not shown, no plantings, we don't know what's gonna be planted. I'm assuming since they clear cut all the lots, they're gonna plant some stuff, so it should be native. I can't remember if there was a planting plan with the last, probably not, because it was a roadway plan. So we need a landscape plan. And riverfront alteration numbers haven't been updated, so with the increase in these houses, they were pretty close to the 10%. I think it was like,
Right, we're,
1,000 something.
Ben Osgood, Ranger Engineering.
so.
Um,
Anyway, those are my
Right.
comments that I didn't get to get you before the meeting.
Right. As Jennifer said, this is for the development of the 4 houses, and she was accurate in her description of what we're doing. They're located in the same locations. We did change some driveways around. I think there's a front entry driveway on one that was a side entry before, that sort of thing. 3 of the homes are strictly buffer zone. They actually, two of the homes are strictly buffer zone. The third house is located right on the edge of the riverfront zone, but it is pretty much where it was proposed or shown in the subdivision but not approved. The fourth one is in the riverfront zone, but the disturbed area stayed the same. We worked within the same footprint that was approved for, that wall that they constructed delineates the disturbed area. So the riverfront area,
Disturbance. I was kind
Disturbance
of wondering
didn't
if
change.
impervious versus pervious disturbance.
the impervious, so that's lot 7. What was approved, the roof was 1536, we're now 2100. The driveway was 1406, we're 1430. So we did increase the impervious area a little bit in the riverfront area, but we did do the calculations to show that it did not increase the runoff. The infiltration for lot 7 and lot 6 go into individual roof infiltrators, and we plugged in the numbers, and they're still large enough to accept what's going to them from the roof. The driveways are still designed to go into the treatment systems that were in the roadway, and their areas did not increase. I think they decreased a little bit, so the treatment train still will provide the treatment required. As Jennifer said, we did the large detention area, or buried detention pond right here. That's on the back of lot 6. We did the calculations with just the small increases in runoff, impervious area, it wasn't quite large enough to keep the flows, the peak flows the same as originally designed. So we actually had to add some additional chambers, and we did the calculations for that. So it did have the capacity for the larger roof areas. And I think that was probably one of the main concerns of the commission, was the drainage and ensuring that it would work as designed originally. So I mean, we can show air conditioning units and such. I mean, obviously, it is tight down in this area here. This is the lot 7 is tight. We're still, I think we're no closer than we were before. As approved, I think we're a little bit further away, a few feet. And like I said, the other houses, we tried to keep them pretty much where they were approved. But we can show AC units, and I think, we'd have to put something on this house over here, this location, possibly one there. This is a walkout, so it wouldn't be a bulkhead. These other ones would have bulkheads, but they'd all be out of the 50-foot no-build. We can add those on. Now, landscaping, I don't know that they're gonna provide any landscape trees out in the back. I think their plan right now is just they cleared the area and they're gonna loam it and seed it.
On
and
the whole thing?
Just have big lawns.
That's gonna be a lot of lawn.
Right. Around the house, I mean, does the commission want to see what will go for foundation plantings and that sort of thing?
I would just propose it to them, what they're gonna do for landscaping. I mean, I would, would hope they would provide some shade.
I don't think they plan to provide any trees. I mean, they may provide some along the roadway, but I don't think their backyards will be landscaped.
I
think
mean, I
it'll just be
suppose we
large
could
lawn areas.
condition that any landscaping be native.
Mhm.
I thought there was some kind of condition in here. Yeah, it says the project as permitted by this OOC will alter 35,809 square feet or 8.6% of the riverfront area in accordance with 310 CMR 10.58, blah, 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 of the riverfront. As such, any future development on the parcel or subsequent lots will need to remain within this allowance. So you're
Right.
saying that that's the case?
That's what we did, right?
Joe?
Just want to be real brief on this. You said to accommodate some of the runoff, you had to increase the chambers in D4? I guess that's in
D4,
in D4. And just, where's the line drawn between subdivision infrastructure versus lot development? Are they the same parties? Are they lots sold to individuals?
No, this is being developed by one developer. They're gonna
So
build all
the
7 houses and the
infrastructure
roadway.
and all the housing, so
Right.
there's no jurisdiction or concern of who's gonna do
Right, we
what?
don't have that, oh, I'm the builder, that's not my responsibility, I'm the developer.
That was exactly my question, I'm
And I'll-
also that.
I will actually say, they've already installed it with the bigger footprint, because they were doing it the day I called them and said, we need to make it bigger, so they said, how much, and they got the extra chambers and did it.
Okay. And the roof infiltrators, there's no calculations on those. You don't have any soils testing out there, you're just assuming the soils are pretty much
They had soil testing.
They did soil testing in the original report, and that's what we used.
Okay,
Yep. And,
so when you say they're sized right, they're based on,
right, based on the same information that they used to size them in the original drainage report. So we took their drainage report, it was a HydroCAD report, I just mimicked it in our HydroCAD program.
I'm all set, as long as the analysis is based on actual soil conditions,
Yeah.
I'm satisfied.
Well, we also had a condition that if they encountered different conditions during construction, they needed to notify us, so.
Right.
Okay, all set.
Any monumentation at the no disturb?
It should
They've
already be in.
They've already installed the wall at the no disturb.
Wall's done, okay.
Wall's done, yeah.
That's what I'm looking for, all set.
The only question I have is that,
Erosion control reconstruction, not wall.
the detention pond that they were using, it's on private property. That we decided who's gonna be, are you making your own?
They've talked to the owners, and the owners were all for cleaning it up, and I think,
We have documentation of that. We required it before they
I
started
forget, so I.
working, that they, because the drainage for the North Cross subdivision goes into that pond, but somehow that homeowner owns it and it is responsible for its maintenance. So when these guys came along and said, we'd like to maintain that pond and potentially use it for some of our stormwater from this particular, it's actually just that one catch basin, right?
Right.
That drains out there.
right.
They provided us documentation that they were willing, they provided documentation that they owned it and were required to maintain it, and that they agreed that the developer could use it and maintain it.
So the they, Who? We're talking about the future owner? or-
No,
or
the owner of the existing detention basin that's on the North
Will
Cross
continue to
subdivision.
own it and will continue to maintain it.
No, they've taken over, again, some maintenance responsibilities.
Right.
I forget what's in the file, but there's something in the file in that
But is there a
regard.
home, there's no homeowners association out here, they're all individual.
Not in North Cross, no. But North Cross, I don't think, is also not an accepted street because it never got the sewer it was supposed to get.
Right. The owner is Harrington, so they've talked to the Harringtons, and the Harringtons have said, maintain it for us, fine. The developers agreed to do that.
The developers are gonna maintain that pond.
Well, eventually it'll be a homeowners
Right. association
That's the question. So there is a
Yes.
homeowners association.
On the new
who
development.
will ultimately be responsible for maintaining all the systems.
I think on this particular structure that they'll probably only be responsible for maintaining the new inlet and potentially, the outlet. But the basin itself, we had them do some cleanup of saplings around the edge and some dead things. But for the most part, it's remained pretty open and clear.
But I thought you said that it hadn't been maintained.
No, it hadn't, but they've done that now.
And so Harrington and you guys are gonna maintain it?
Going
Or
forward, that's the
homeowners
response.
association?
Going forward, the developer and then eventually the homeowners association is gonna take care of that maintenance. They're gonna keep it clean. We actually had to clean the outlet. The trees had grown up and kind of clogged it a little bit, so they took some trees down, they're pulling the stumps out, putting some new riprap in, which is right next to where they're gonna connect to it.
Right.
And they're gonna do all that work. They're gonna cut all the saplings that are growing up inside and remove all the Christmas trees and the leaves. They're gonna do all that. They haven't done that yet. They're waiting for it to dry up in the summertime
Okay.
before they do that
The
kind of
reason,
stuff.
Ben, I'm not picking on your project, it's just, I'm not a big fan of homeowners associations, because they don't do anything.
I know. But if it's legally there, then you legally have somebody to go,
Legally,
you know,
they
hey.
are usually solved.
But in this case, in this case, they're gonna have to, because isn't that gonna be part of the maintenance of the lift station and the sewer and everything?
Right.
So that's gonna it's gonna really have some responsibilities. It's not just gonna be picking up leaves.
Good point.
Right,
Yeah, so they're really gonna have to do it, or their toilets won't flush.
right.
Yeah, so I mean, that,
Exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Best
all
motivator.
right, so
You ain't lying.
that was a big bone of contention of me in the subdivision, was that pond being maintained. You know, you got permission from the homeowner, but that doesn't mean it's getting maintained.
It was a pre-construction condition, so we have the agreement, like, you,
Okay.
that you required it, you wouldn't let them start the project until they had it.
Yeah, I wanted to just make
So
sure that,
it hasn't been maintained, and when did they build North Cross? 1984,
yeah,
85?
someone had to say.
So, what's that? That's 30 years. It's gonna get a nice freshening up, and
The one you're talking about, the reason it hadn't been maintained is because it was installed incorrectly and was never brought online. Is that the one I'm thinking of?
No, it functions.
Yep, it basically, except,
Which is the one that was installed at the bottom of a hill that is relying upon this lift station to fix it.
That's the sewer.
That's a sewer.
That's not, yeah, the sewer was laid and dry, it never functioned, because it never had a way to get it out by
Positive
gravity.
flow.
That's a different, same project, different problem.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right.
And not this
Talking
project,
drains
the old
versus
project.
sewage.
Gotcha, all right, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, Deb,
No question.
Doug?
No question.
Motion.
Think of things to do.
Oh, I'm sorry, but it's, go ahead.
talk at the end?
No, you know
No,
what?
you can talk
Come
now.
up, come up to the table and just have a seat, identify yourself, and you'll be on TV, you'll be famous by morning. Or maybe by midnight tonight, you never know. Just tell us who you are and where you live.
Carlos Restrepo, one of the neighbors on North Cross.
Okay.
So, we just weren't clear from this in the paper where we got 4 houses is what's being approved here. There's more lots. Are more going to be built, or is it now just a 4-house development?
So these are the only, oh, go ahead.
yeah, 7 lots total, but 3 of the lots are not, do not require a permit from this board. They're
So that's more
outside of-
planning board? Because this is only stuff on the riverfront, right? This is a commission.
This is the Conservation Commission, this is for the wetland issues. The other 3 houses are outside of the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, and they've already been approved by the planning board.
Right,
So 7 houses are going to be built?
Yep.
Yes.
So lots 1, 2, and 3, the houses are outside the buffer, but the lots do have jurisdictional areas,
Right, and the lots were permitted under the prior filing.
previous filing.
But to answer your question, there likely will be 7 houses.
7 houses.
Yes.
The initial subdivision plan called for 7 parcels.
Right, and so they're all going to be built.
And the only reason they're back with this is because part of that permit that we issued said if you change these lots that are with the houses or the driveways or anything, if you change them in any
No.
way, you need to bring them
We
back into it.
didn't permit the houses. They strictly asked that the
No
houses
housing at all.
not be
It was
permitted
based
under
on,
the.
yeah, but it was based on the square footage, allowable square footage of impervious. So if you increase it, you had to come back before us to get the permit.
So, second question, what I just heard is when you approved this project, it was approved for a full-blown clear cut and no replanting. That was the way
Just
you all
lawn,
approved it?
right.
Because it was far enough from the wetlands?
Correct.
Yeah, they're observing a no disturb, there's a no disturb area where a wall has been constructed. They can't go over that wall and into the no disturb area, but so they can legally go up to that wall and they can cut and just have lawn
Okay.
without trees if they choose. Not everybody likes trees, I don't know.
Kind of a crime if you think about the environment. Okay, and then the only other question is if this isn't the right commission. So if you look at the map, at the picture, it's sliced right through woods. Those are our backyards, right? So the question is, they're building right up to the edge of just a bunch of old woods. Will there be an obligation, either from the Conservation Committee, or I gotta go to the planning, to have to clean up the back? You know, they're just
They're
raggedy.
not allowed to touch the woods.
To the north? Are you talking to the north?
To the north of the tree.
The north of the.
The ones on
the
our
road.
property, our backyards. So you see where the street is?
Yeah.
So now, that was
To the north.
overgrown, you know, half grown, and so the question is, they're sliced it right there. And so now my question is the town gonna come and say, you're next to a road now, you have to clean up, and is it a conservation thing? You know, clean, because they're just
Well, they-
overgrown and all
They can
that.
only cut what's on their property.
Right. So I'm asking, the question is not about that. The question is, once there's a road, is there a conservation area or a planning, that we have an obligation, we the owners of
The
that,
lots to the north.
that overlook a road, you know, because that's a road now, do we have to clean up? Because that's what we don't understand. Will we have to clean up?
I think what he's saying,
Oh,
I think
you mean future,
he's saying, is
future?
he gonna, because now, he's saying it's an ugly woods next to the road,
No,
does
you-
he need to clean it up?
Yeah, it was literally a tall wood, and they sliced it.
Yeah.
And so now it's just think of
It's-
cutting a piece of cake, and the
Yeah, we
question
just- They
is,
just went along the stone wall.
it's right there
So
a
you
foot
mean-
away.
So you mean, in the future?
Will we have an
If these trees become hazardous to roadway and cars,
Right.
is it your responsibility to attend to those hazardous trees?
Question is, who owns the road?
And who owns the trees?
Trees are on my
The
property.
trees will be
No,
on,
this,
The road will eventually be accepted by the town.
Indeed, but currently it's a
Already
private
exists.
way.
Right. I think it's a public way already.
Yeah,
It's
so
already
Ray
public way, so-
Street's
It's
is
a
an old
public
public
way,
way.
and the town's
So then to be a
obligated
town,
do
to be a
it.
town.
So in the end, I have to figure out with the town, whatever the rules are of having property next to a road.
All
Is
right,
that
let me
what
just
you're
lay
saying?
it straight down, right? So the roadway is a legally existing roadway, though it was previously got improved. Welcome to New England, we have hundreds of them across.
There's a beautiful
Massachusetts.
stone wall, yeah,
So
covering the
that
road.
roadway legally exists. They are building that roadway. It doesn't need to go for town acceptance. It's already accepted as a public way. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, I bet.
As long as it existed prior to 1850.
Correct.
Yeah, which it
So
did.
Which it did.
Which it did.
Ray Street did,
Yeah.
it's one of the
Which it
oldest, roads in town. And
Gilbert
because of
Gully.
that, the private property, anything on the care and custody of your own private property is in fact the private property's responsibility. The town will not come in and say, you have to do something. It's your property, you can do what you want with it. If a tree falls down across the road, creates a hazard, the
Gotta
town will
take it
clear
off, yes.
But, you know, they're not likely to come in and say, clear it down. The utility company, on the other hand, if there's utility concerns with wires and whatnot in the future, the utility
it's
company
underground.
might.
And
come
really
in and
quick,
take
to
it
keep
off.
going, one last question, because I just, I'm learning, is if I decide I want to, since it is just raggedy old trees and vines, and I want to clear cut and plant spruces to block, my view, is that a commission thing or is that a planning board
If
thing?
you're within 100 feet, it could be us.
Or
Depending
Well-
on where your line is.
There is no, we're far away from,
well, I don't know about.
So
the
you
wetland.
should call the answer.
Yeah,
really
that's what I
easy.
just wanted to understand
Call-
here.
Call the office and speak to the people that work there,
Mm-hmm.
and there'll be somebody that'll come out and take a look for you
thank you.
and say.
Which
yes,
office?
yeah.
Conservation?
Conservation.
Call conservation.
688-9530.
What is, Ben, what is the right of way for the road, 60 feet or 40?
Oh, it's
50 feet.
50 feet. So,
What does that mean?
in other words, the town owns 50 feet, but the road, which is probably, what, 24 feet?
The
Right.
actual paved surface
Paved
is
surface is
not as big
Pavement
as.
is 24 feet, and they own either side for a total of 50
They
feet.
expanded the right-of-way, though, into the lots, not
Right.
onto the other side.
Right.
Well, it doesn't matter. The town is regulated with, has 50 feet of right-of-way. So everything on, beyond that is your property.
So they own 20,
So you
No,
own
they
what,
don't.
say,
They
what's
own
it,
to the
third-
stone
say
wall.
third,
They own
Stone.
right away.
say 13 feet off of the road to you, to a
No.
gate. So beyond the 13 feet is your property.
Yeah,
It's
the
It's
stone
pretty,
wall,
the stone wall is your property.
here's a stone wall right along there.
Okay,
It's the
so
best.
that-
but
so there
then,
you go.
the last, and I'll go, because I don't want to, but then, if that's town property and there's ratty old or dangerous trees, is it the town's responsibility to clean that?
That'd
I
be-
think before the town's gonna accept the roadway, they're gonna make sure that all of that vegetation's in good shape. So if they've done something to the edge of roadway there and it's hazardous, the town's not gonna accept it until they fix it.
No, they didn't do anything. They just sliced it. So it was just old, old trees, and they sliced
We're
it.
dealing with
So-
way too many hypotheticals.
So, okay, I'll
gonna
call
look-
the
I'm gonna look to
conservation.
Ben, just one last time, because he's saying accept it. I'm not sure what needs to be accepted. There may be no need for future acceptance.
Acceptance,
And by the way, I go to planning board or to conservation for trees,
conservation,
for trees if I want to plant or do
yeah.
a clear. Okay,
Can you point out where your property is?
it's 29, so it's Restrepo, so it's probably lot, we show them, you see, which one is it? It's the one that has the main backyard to this whole project. Everybody else is.
You don't have the pond, you're not on the corner.
No, I'm 3 in from
3 in.
Harrington.
Okay.
So this one here, it
The
says,
Restrepo Pandolfo?
right,
Oh, okay,
Pandolfo, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so that's
All right.
right,
Right in
right,
here.
it's a clear one.
So he's right at the end of the detention pond. So the
Right.
pond ends right here, and that's him.
All right.
But the pond
So-
isn't a
It's not a
jurisdiction over.
Just
the-
trying to understand
There's
if I'm
another
new here,
trench.
new house for me, if I have any obligations, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, come, just get in touch with the office.
Do
and-
that, I'll do that.
Just so you know, the town owns 13 feet on that side of on your property, because they have a 50-foot right-of-way. So you take the road, and
When it's paved.
Yeah,
there'll be a
you'll see
13-foot
it.
buffer there.
There'll be a
The
13-foot
pavement and then
buffer.
the wall.
And it will be someone else's responsibility to
Yes,
clear that.
the town's,
The wall is the property line,
Right,
yes.
It's
13
also
feet.
the right-of-way line.
right.
Okay, all right. I just trying to understand what we will have to do or not do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we need a motion.
So, any other abutters want to be heard?
Well, I guess
No,
the
We do,
que-
we do.
We have another abutter that would
yeah,
like to ask.
and the question
que-
is too, are you
Let's go
ready to
to the,
close the public
Can you
hearing?
come up to the table also? Thanks.
Sorry, and this is sort of a follow-up question to there. Elizabeth Williamson, and I own the property along the first 4 lots that are being developed. So my question is for the right-of-way, because now I'm confused. My understanding is my property is the rock wall.
Yes, that
So-
doesn't change.
And even though they're building the road right next to the rock wall,
Uh,
nothing changes with my
Again,
property line,
the
right?
discussion,
No.
this discussion was had a long time ago, so it's probably not fresh in everyone's mind. But when they built this, the rock wall couldn't be changed, right? So the right-of-way, to get the width for the right-of-way,
It's going
most
to
of the
new
right-of-way
properties.
is on the new properties, nothing changed about your property line.
Okay.
Still same as it ever was.
Okay. And just to confirm, in those prior meetings, the buildings for the first 3 lots were approved?
They were depicted.
They were
They were
depicted on the
depicted, but I
plan.
guess my understanding was everything was just for the
Nothing,
roadway and utilities.
none of the
and there's
houses
gonna
were
be no-
approved. No footprints, no nothing. All we approved was an amount of disturbance to be able to calculate what they could clear for riverfront purposes. But they did not approve any structures of any kind, only the stormwater management system, the roadway, and the sewer pump station.
That's what they're here for now.
And an assumed amount of impervious area to
No,
to
well,
si-
that's what they
size stormwater.
base the
To size
stormwater
the
on, right.
stormwater.
Right.
But they were required to file for any houses within jurisdiction.
Okay, and then in lot 1, like jurisdiction is only within how many feet of the
100
river?
feet of the bordering vegetated wetland and 200 feet of mean annual high water of the brook, which is kind of out in the wetland, except when it gets close to the road. So all of
Okay,
those
so lot
numbers.
1 isn't included in that then?
So there is jurisdiction on Lot 1, but the house itself is
It's
not
outside
within
of it,
jurisdiction.
right, okay.
Ben, one other thing that's missing from the plan too is that 100-foot,
Inner riparian.
well,
First
the
100
zone
feet.
of natural vegetation that was required to be maintained is not on the plan.
It's the first 100 feet of the riverfront that's missing. And that equals the 100-foot
veg.
We can add that on, that's not a problem, it's just.
And Jen, there's
It
no-
should,
and
it should
there's no
fall
question-
outside of the no disturb wall for the most part.
Right.
I'm just gonna, and there's no concern that that's within the clear cut area.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, it just wasn't something we could confirm because it's not on the plan.
And then
The
one
wall
last
didn't
question.
move, I mean, the wall stayed with the design.
Yep,
so
no,
it
I
should
saw
be
it.
out of it, but
It
we
should-
can add that on there.
And then before they start constructing the buildings, is that just building permitting process through planning
Yeah,
board?
this is all part of it. They need an order of conditions from us, and then they've got to satisfy a bunch of other things. The building permit is signed off by multiple departments before they could start.
Yeah. So the, we'll have them stake the houses ahead of time.
Okay.
There'll be a process for them, a pre-construction process before they can put the houses in.
Good.
And they gotta certify the foundations that they are where they were approved. They're not bigger than what they were approved,
Okay,
so
all the setbacks
there's
and their,
the setbacks that they're supposed to be where they are.
okay. Sorry, one last question.
all right.
That's okay.
Utilities, I've seen the pipes out, and I don't know if this is a question for you or the developer, but my road is gonna be torn up. My access to my house is going to be cut off, I'm guessing. I don't know when I should get notice of that.
I'm sure they'll let you know when they're gonna do it, that's down the road a little ways. But there's a force main that runs up through that existing piece of Ray Street out.
As it heads towards Abbott. I think they tie into the sewer up on Abbott Street. So, but they'll let you
It's not in
know.
the next several days.
No.
No, definitely not in the next several days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you have to do a modification with the planning board for the changes?
I don't know, I mean, we haven't, I'll talk to them about the infiltrator and the drainage. We've talked to Public Works about some issues out here, and they haven't said we had to go back.
I would just ask
Right.
planning if they want a minor mod or if they can just do it administratively, but
Yep.
I wouldn't not tell them.
So what are we doing? We're gonna continue, we gotta approve it and we can do the decision at the next meeting? or-
Well, I think the decision needs to be written for the next meeting. I would leave it open so you can just make them, if there
We'll add
needs
the
to be any changes
things
to
on
the
the
plan.
plan that you need,
Yeah.
and-
It's just, got to make some changes. You got to make some additions to the plan.
Right.
Maybe we should just
If there's
kick it.
any landscaping,
Pertinent utilities.
yeah, if they want to
Yep.
put any
AC units,
generators or
bulkheads, that kind of
whatever.
thing, yeah.
Right,
Now's the time to put it on, Ben.
Right.
okay.
Yeah,
so
we can leave it open, we'll bring a new plan in.
Would there be a way just to add a notation on the plan that any landscaping must be native
We could
within
condition it in
jurisdiction?
the order.
Well, maybe the next plan we see,
Oh.
that notation will be right there.
Mhm.
Add plan note.
Yeah.
It's just,
Any other questions?
so for work, for the force main and the water that exits at the end of the cul-de-sac, do we have erosion control spec for that? Is that in?
It's on the original subdivision plan. So this is,
Okay.
there was a subdivision plan done, and we're just coming in behind it.
Is that the original subdivision?
This is the original subdivision.
She's got that is the plan.
Right.
Yeah, I don't
It's
think
just
the
not
erosion
clear.
controls extended down that road. But the resource area may end there too, Amy.
Well, we've got, oh, no.
Sorry.
So 100-foot force main, water. So.
Yeah, I don't
just
think
that-
that, I don't think that was
I'm gonna
addressed.
recommend
So,
continue.
something to follow up on.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to, obviously, this isn't,
Yep.
this submittal doesn't cover that area, but I'm
Right.
sure I can bring it to their attention, and if we need an erosion control plan for that area, we can do that,
okay.
so.
Right, so we're gonna, motion to continue.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
So we'll have to get
And Ben, like I said, I would talk to Amy, so we can clean everything up at the next meeting.
Get something to her, Friday, and we'll have all the revised plans done for the next meeting.
Very good,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks.
Next one is 242-1722, request to continue 173 Campbell Road.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye?
July 10th.
Oh, July.
To July 10th.
I just put request to continue.
Yeah,
The request is to the 10th.
the 10th of July.
And did they give a reason why they requested to continue that long?
I'm sorry, what?
Did they give a request to,
Yes, they just got it planted, so this was the one, they're seeking their COC, but it wasn't stabilized when I went out there a couple months ago, and she said she was having trouble getting somebody in, so last week, I think it got seeded, and she's just gotta wait for the grass to grow, literally.
okay, great. Next one is 242-1736, COC request for 195 Olympic Lane. You're back.
Welcome back to the party,
You
kids.
wanted to present it,
Oh,
you
sure.
went out there.
Okay. All right, so this order of conditions was for an addition towards the front of the house. I did a site inspection this afternoon. Found that the proposed addition was built to plan as approved. The wetland consultant provided interim measurements of the foundation prior to stick work. So that part is in compliance. The area of stockpile is starting to grow in. There's some dirt patches, but there is no risk of sedimentation. There is no evidence of that right now, so I'm okay with that. I did ask the homeowner to remove an old remnant wood slat fence that is behind the chain link fence and a errant hay bale right next to the wetland. And just reminded them that, you know, there was previous dumping from the previous owner, but that needs, you know, that can't continue in any way, shape, or form, so. I think that's it.
Joe?
No question.
Al?
So you're satisfied with the stability of the site, Amy?
I am.
Okay, thank you. I'm all
Yep.
set. I'm all set.
No question.
Doug? All right,
Motion,
okay, motion,
right here.
second?
So, do we want to just,
Yeah, I had recommended, when Amy had told me what she found, that you issue it and then just hold it until you confirm that you were able to clean up the,
wood slat fence and the hay bale?
Oh, I was gonna say that after we
Yeah, yeah.
clear the decision.
Okay, so
That we would hold it until that.
right, right.
the
You'll
was
issue it,
taken
and
care of.
then they can just let us know when.
that's my
when
motion,
done.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Okay.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. And now you know they'll hold the decision until you clean up the debris and that was the, yep, that-
Hay bale,
hay bales.
one hay bale.
One hay
One,
bale.
oh, one?
I don't know why.
I don't even
It's
remember.
like, it's very weird. It's an escapee, so.
They didn't even use the
Battery
gas,
bracket.
right?
No, no.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
great. Thanks. So you can just give me a call when that stuff is taken out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's it.
This is, what can we do with this one? 2420628, partial COC for 66 Meadowwood Road.
I don't think anyone's here for that.
Wait, is this the one,
It never goes away. And
is this the one that was on the last meeting?
Yeah.
and the meeting before,
We talked about this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And nothing's changed, right, for the submittal?
No.
And there's been no new information.
no.
I'm going to move that we deny the request.
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. That's the first thing I asked Amy today. We have any more information on this guy? Nope, okay, good.
Okay.
The request of COC is, comes with an application fee, right?
Yep.
Yep, so that, make sure the record shows that's with prejudice
I don't want him coming in after the fact.
We're not waiving it.
Yeah, he's gonna refile.
We're not waiving it. They're not in any position to refile anyway. They're not in compliance with
Yeah,
half a
I mean,
dozen
it's not
orders.
so much the homeowner, it's the subdivisions, just, they can't keep.
But if you recall, the conversation that when I had last time, the new owner required the selling party to escrow money pending the release.
Right.
The release isn't possible because part of the order of conditions calls for an owners association
To
to own,
maintain the drainage.
which doesn't exist.
Right, and
There isn't one.
nor do all I asked for too was proof that at least there was an easement to that, so, this.
But it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
The maintenance of the easement it comes under the homeowners association, which doesn't exist. So the whole thing is FUBA. It can't happen.
Gotcha. Okay, we don't need to talk about it anymore.
Okay.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, all homeowners associations don't exist.
That's not true. This
Why,
one
you
is.
know one?
No, there are
It's
a lot.
definitely
There's
not
gotta be
true.
at least one that.
It's definitely not true.
that's fine.
There's definitely some.
There's gotta be at least one in compliance.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, Hickory, the one off of, up off of Bradford Street there, the new one that had an Osgood Street address.
And if that's the case, Lou, and if that's tied to compliance and release of bonds and so forth, then there's gonna be a lot of denials.
Nowadays, too, we make, planning especially makes the homeowners association escrow like 5 years of funds or have contracts with a maintenance company to do the maintenance.
That might be a good inquiry to make on this one to see if they have such
They
a.
do not. This one's, you remember this project. This is,
This was a 40B.
Right, there's no home.
And I remember this one very well. There were a lot of things that happened on this one, and a lot of mistakes were made. But, okay, all set, thanks.
Very good. All right, next part of discussion is the warrant article discussion and recommendation.
Really?
well, because the article changed, I mean, you voted to recommend support for Article 5, I think it was a different article number last time. The plan has since been tweaked to be slightly larger in area, but still accomplishes everything that it did before, which is basically all of the watershed land that abuts Lake Kachikowick would be under the care, custody, and control of the commission. So I would recommend you vote to, once again, support this article at another town meeting, which is in the 18th, in a week.
Any discussion? Joe?
No discussion.
No.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Deb? Doug? Okay, motion?
The motion is to vote to support Article 5.
So moved.
Question? I'm sorry, hate to do it.
That's okay.
Does Article 5 involve any other portion of the property or just the open watershed area? In the map, this area here with the buildings, is that part of Article 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but that's the part that you don't get.
But
You don't get it. It doesn't become under the care,
By
custody, and
voting
control.
to support, are we supporting whatever the plan is?
No, you're only supporting that that the portion
The lot
shown
two.
outside of that block come to you for care, custody, and control.
Because they don't even know what
But
they...
that differentiation isn't going to be made at the town meeting. It's going to be said that the commission voted to support the article.
That's correct.
Well,
And so what is the rest of the verbiage of the article that I'm
The rest of the
supporting?
article does not address this. It only addresses partitioning off the portion that you get. Article 5, I can pull it up and read it to you if you like.
I don't think it's gonna matter, because it's either gonna sell or lease.
No,
That-
that part is
land.
not in this article, that's what I'm telling you.
Well, that's all. I just want to know that that's not in it.
Right.
So there's multiple articles addressing the question. One article simply, whatever number it is, divides the land from what's going to be the leased or sold versus whatever's going to be retained under the care and custody of us.
Yes.
So if the article is dealing only with dividing up the land to define what we're in control of, then I agree that the recommendation should be to accept that. If it's construed to believe that we're endorsing the whole darn concept, well, that's not what we're voting.
Yeah, and
Hold on
so,
one second.
I believe that's.
No, Article 6 is the sale or lease of a portion of the Stevens estate,
Right.
blah, blah, blah.
That was the-
Article 5 is just the transfer of land to you.
That was the first
All right.
question I asked, that
I
that
apologize for-
area,
I just wanna
that
be-
area was, had nothing to do with us.
No, because this is gonna be.
We're not endorsing it.
This is gonna be a big battle, and
Yeah.
I didn't want to be
I'm
on the record.
endorsing it.
Okay, all right, very good. I'm happy, thank you.
That's why.
Thank you for checking.
We kind of blew that guy out of the water, came in last.
Yeah, that's
So there's
exactly, you
a motion
recall that
on
now?
the table.
Yes.
All right, okay.
Deb might have motioned, so
Yes.
it needs to be seconded.
What's the matter?
Needed to be seconded.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. And next one is MACC Foster Farm Delineation Workshop approval.
So I was supposed to be assisting MACC with the delineation workshop, and I won't be, so Mr. Hockmuth and Mr. Howard will be out there, so I had discussed this, I think, with you some time ago, but since they are now out there on their own, I would prefer that you authorize their activity to conduct,
This is gonna be on the Foster Farm property?
yes,
Oh, no kidding.
So we're just giving them authorization to act
because it's
on our
a-
land
To
on our
conduct,
behalf.
to conduct a workshop.
correct, but I just don't want there to be any issue since
Duly
I won't be
moved.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, and that's unanimous.
Do you have a date, when we're gonna do that?
Tomorrow.
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 But I, when they didn't have, I just
Undiscovered.
bowed out, and so now I felt that they needed that.
Okay, thanks, thank you.
Good timing.
Next one is an enforcement order, and I don't see all the suits, so I don't know what's going on with
Yeah.
that.
I
They're
think
all
I
outside,
saw-
they're all lined up.
They are
Why
out there?
don't we do the decision, Mr. Chairman?
Okay, we can do that. 242-1753,
The draft.
Enterprise Bank.
So this, there's an error at the top. The planning board closed June 4th, not June 11th. Lots of documents. There's a buffer zone restoration, which is laid out in condition number 35. They're pulling back the parking lot and doing some planting in the no disturb zone. They also have a wall, which comes up in a later condition. For bonds, I did 10,000. Plus, minus, it seemed consistent with other commercial development. You know, there's underground infiltration, there's connection, there's,
It's reasonable.
most of the site is within your jurisdiction.
No objection.
Okay. Standard erosion controls. Condition 50 is their New England style stone wall monumentation. Put markers up. No, it's requiring it as a no disturbance monumentation, the stone wall.
But they have to build one.
Correct, there is none
All
out
right,
there on this,
okay.
yeah. The stormwater conditions are there. They're required to submit reports. I'm now requiring, once again, we used to do it, and then we kind of went to people maintained their own reports about stormwater maintenance. The new MS4 permit's gonna require that kind of information, so we should be requiring them to send it to us, so that's in there. Do we want to require them to have a maintenance contractor or us to have the agreement? I kind of highlighted that in condition 62.
Is there anything extraordinary about the site that would require that?
Rain gardens.
Is there a rain
No,
garden?
they did a tree box filter or something.
Well, filter, yeah, those also need to be maintained
Yeah,
properly.
and they have underground infiltration.
They were using
Okay.
Filtrex boxes, yeah.
So, yeah, then
I mean,
yes.
yeah, the bank people.
So there
aren't gonna
should be a
doing-
maintenance agreement on that,
Okay,
yes, absolutely.
So it's there. Yeah. It just sort of, they let us know who's doing it kind of thing. We have a couple of those out there. I think everything else is pretty standard. Fertilizers, no snow stockpiling signs I required along that wall, because that's not the area they should be stockpiling snow. And then the O&M will be attached, so.
Okay, any questions?
No questions, Jim.
We didn't change anything, right?
We didn't-
Well, I changed at the top the date. It has to change
All
for
right,
the
so I
plan.
move that we adopt as
As
amended.
amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Next order of business is 242-1692, 1210 Osgood Street, and I am going to recuse myself and turn the chairmanship over to Mr. Manzi.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Mike, would you please come up and take a seat?
Give you a seat with a microphone.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Just give me a minute, guys, bear with me. I'm just going to get my documents in order here.
Sure.
And we're going to try to go quickly, no speed bumps tonight, okay, guys? Puck drops in 3 minutes. 8 minutes, okay, I'm sorry. So, Michael Sebelius, I know most of you have probably met Michael. He's with GEI. He's the consultant, and I've asked him to sit at the table for purposes of this hearing. I think most of you have met Michael. If you haven't, this is him. For purposes of tonight's hearing, we're going to be making reference to the following documents. I want to make sure we all have the same documents, okay? So the summary, the peer review summary and findings dated June 11th from GEI is one of the documents we'll be making reference to. The second document would be the peer review supplemental regulatory review dated June 12th. You should have those. We'll be making reference to that as well.
Mr. Chairman, we have not seen a copy of that document.
We're
Okay.
getting them for you right
All right, so my apologies, that was just generated today, so it's going to be distributed tonight. There were some documents submitted by Sanborn Head dated
June 6th.
June 6th, thank you. And I believe there's a large document today that was submitted or published today that we don't have copies of.
Oh, from the
Ecotech.
Paul, Ecotex.
That was just published today. We don't have any copies of that. So we'll be using it I guess in a limited capacity, since none of us have had a chance to actually read it. So with that part being done, I think it would be fair to just give a quick summation of the events since last week. GEI came on board and has been on the site. I understand you're just getting the supplemental regulatory review tonight. It's 2 pages. But the primary report is the peer review. And I think I'd like to have Mike just give a brief summary of your review and your recommendations, if there's no objections from anybody.
No objections from us.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yes, sir, thank you. Overall, we based on our site visit and documents provided through June 7th, 2019. In our site visit, we evaluated the groundwater treatment system currently in place at the site, found it adequate and effective in doing its job. It's doing what it needs to do. We also agree with the opinions generated thus far that the stormwater infiltration is resulting in percolation and/or partial inundation of the RCA, which is resulting in leachate dilating at the base of the stone wall, which is, of course, being currently handled by the wastewater treatment system. And that we also agree that the placement of an asphalt base course will assist in reducing the leachate issue at the property. We do have several additional considerations and recommendations. I'm not sure how you want to get into those right now.
It's up to you. You can present them, or I'm trying to make this go smoothly, but there's a lot of information.
There is a lot of information.
Do you have a preference, Counsel?
We can certainly ask them questions about that as we proceed, I think, if that would work. Is that a better way to go? And we have
Yeah,
some
I'm pretty sure
suggestions.
you guys don't
as to
want me to read this verbatim.
How to
I'll
move
fall
forward.
asleep.
Let's not do that. Yeah.
If you've seen the document that he's referring to and you want to ask some questions, by all means.
Great, we do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have just a sort of a point of order in terms of how we're going to proceed this evening. We have a number of people here, both from my client. I'm Bill Such from Goulston Stores in Boston.
Yes.
There's a number of folks here tonight from my client, including Dan Brenner, Deputy General Counsel, Ted Kramer, Executive VP of Construction, Noam Magenzi, General Counsel for NRP, Brenda Gilmore, VP of Construction from NRP, Jeff Brown, General Counsel at Princeton Properties, my colleague Kevin O'Flaherty, a litigator in our office at Goulston Stores, John Rockwood, the Chief Environmental Scientist at Ecotech. Paul McManus was not able to attend this evening, so John has gotten up to speed, has been out to the site as well, and is here tonight to present on his recent findings. And Kim Gravel is here, who is a Senior Project Manager with Lockwood Remediation. Kim has been on the site numerous times and is very familiar with the remediation system there, which can give a brief update as to her review of the status of that system and its effectiveness. In addition, Joe Piznola from Hancock Associates is expected to attend later this evening. He had another meeting in Dracut, I believe, and is coming here directly from that meeting.
It is our hope that we're not here that long, but by all means, call your witnesses.
So I think, from
It may not be necessary.
I do want to put on the record, though, that, I mean, for the first time in the introduction, have I heard now a real strategic and fortified line of counsel
Sure.
representing various parties. So I caution this commission that if this starts taking on the realm of gathering facts and they're being represented by counsel and us not, that I may suggest that we cut the discussion short and refer the matter to our counsel. Because, I mean, this is clearly a major issue. It's been an ongoing issue. It's one we've identified pretty early on in the project. And as we've discovered things, what we've found is good faith on behalf of the applicant, trying to carry things out to mitigate and minimize the impacts as best they can. They are successful as they move forward. What we continue to have is an uncertainty of how long does that need to continue? Does it abate to the point that it's no longer necessary, and what measurement mechanisms do we have moving forward? So all that stuff's undefined yet, but in the meantime, what we have is clearly a situation that's part of the development, part of permitting, and part of construction and means and methods, none of which that we get involved with. We get into the permitting. And I want to be real careful that, by selection of materials that were specifically excluded under our order conditions by introducing recycled asphalt, recycled concrete and recycled glass materials, that these types of circumstances arise. And I'm going to point out, I forget the number, but I think it's condition 37.
It's condition 73, but who's counting?
Transpose the number. But it's that one violation of our order conditions that has manifested this mess.
So I think that's pretty clear. I think that's why we have a consultant representing us now and conducting an investigation and working, I believe, working with the applicant and asking questions. I believe our consultant has come up with some findings and some conclusions. I'm not at the stage yet where I think we should not have this open discussion. I think that...
Oh, no, I just caution that should we find that it will come up to that point, I'll voice my concern more specifically at that point, but...
I think we're in the fact-finding stage. I think that there's good faith on both sides of the table right now. I'm not concerned. My humble opinion would be to proceed, and yes, I'll proceed with caution. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think the best way to proceed would be to have Mr. Rockwood and Ms. Gravel give their very brief, sort of fact-based presentations. And I think we have a proposal as to a way forward really built on the GEI presentation, which will lead to some discussion, I think. Honestly, I can't comment on the June 12 document. I just haven't had a chance to review it.
No, I understand, and
Under
that's...
reserve rights as to that document.
We have the same problem with the EOTech document. That's looks like it's about 50 pages, and we just got that today as well.
On that note, then, other than saying for the record, go Bruins. I understand. We can all agree on that tonight anyway, right? Actually, we can't all agree on that. I'm aware of at least one Blues fan in the room.
Well, he or she should remain silent.
Agreed.
That person's
Agreed.
also a Yankees fan, probably.
John, why don't you start out with your presentation, and then Kim can do her presentation.
Okay. For the record, my name is Dr. John Rockwood. I'm a Chief Environmental Scientist at Ecotech. I was out at the site last Friday with Paul McManus, and we evaluated the wetlands and buffer zone areas that have been affected by the project, and have come up with some recommendations relative to those areas. The best thing to do is there's two figures sort of in the back of that document. If you go to that, we can quickly go through the various areas, and then I can discuss what we did and what our findings and recommendations are. During the evaluation, no new areas that have been affected were observed. All the areas that Paul had previously described in his previous two letters, that's the extent of the impact. So we concentrated our observations in those areas. Figure 1 has areas A through area H identified with a blue label that says main seep former on it. And I'll speak to that figure first. It's probably 2 pages after the text, so probably about 14 pages into the document. And it's just an 8.5 by 11. This is just a larger one.
You can just go ahead with your...
So basically, the main seep area, you start out at area A, which is just below the retaining wall. That area has been affected by the project, and there was a dead shrub and herbaceous material found in that area. We've recommended in that area to do some supplemental plantings with shrubs and some seeding with a native seed mix to restore the vegetative community in that area. A lot of that area was vegetated previously with some invasive shrubs, so we clearly don't want to plant invasive materials. We just want to get some native materials in that provide similar habitat features. So we've provided a listing of plant materials in the report. Area B, which is just down gradient of Area A, includes bordering vegetated wetlands and a thin strip of adjacent buffer zone. That area also has some shrub and ground cover impacts. We provided a planting plan for that area and a different seed mix because it's actually wetland as opposed to the upper area, which is more of a buffer zone area. So in Area A, we've proposed 45 plant shrubs, and in Area B, 36 shrubs to restore the understory. The trees are doing fine in those areas, none to very minor stress of the trees, so those are going to recover. As we move further downstream, we come to Area C. The only recommendation we have there is to continue to monitor it. The vegetation in that area looks perfectly fine. What happens is in the shallower sloped areas, the material stuck around a little bit longer and caused more stress. In the slightly more sloped areas, it moved through more quickly. So it was there for a shorter duration, so there was less impact associated with it. Area D is down near the gate to the 25, the off-site property there, the 25 Conant Street, I believe, Commerce Street. And that's another relatively flat area where there's really no shrubs in there, but there's herbaceous vegetation that was impacted. We're proposing shrub plantings and seed that area as well. The details are in the report. Area E is a wetland swale with a stream channel in it. Within the stream channel, there's a brittle crust or a layer of granular crystal that's sort of like fine sand, and that's calcite. It's seeming to start to break up. It's not like a solid crust like you'd expect. It seems to be weathering. We've proposed to remove the calcite from those areas, but using hand methods, and just to monitor the plantings moving forward, because the plantings are really unaffected. There's a little bit of brown leaf tip stress on some of the shrubs and the skunk cabbage, but there's really no widespread impact to the vegetation. Area F is below Building D, so we've moved back up to the down below the wall again. That area sort of looks like it's a cart path kind of area, which there wasn't much vegetation in to begin with. We're just proposing to plant 12 shrubs within that area to restore a shrub vegetated community there.
I'm sorry, which area was that?
That was Area F. It's downgrading the little wall. It's near the erosion controls.
Yeah, that area, that's where who was that? Brendan, where they cut the tree and put the tree stand, is that? I think that's that area. So there was some disturbance there by somebody else that, it wasn't like that before.
There's sort of a cart path scenario there
Yeah,
with some herbaceous
That
material.
appeared this sort of spring, but, okay.
Okay, and Area G is further down gradient. It's roughly 1,000 square foot triangle. We're proposing 32 plantings and some seeding within that area as well. The plantings would be proposed in the fall of 2019. We're getting into the point where planting, just before the hottest part of the summer really isn't a good idea because you'd have to irrigate and water these materials. The idea would be put them in, get them established, and then let them go on their own, and then monitor them for a 2-year period with annual reports to the commission. That's the intent of the planting plan. And the last area is Area H. It's actually down in an area that was affected by a beaver dam. And what it is there's stream channels that are developing within that former ponded area. And basically that's another monitor-only area. There's very limited calcite within the stream channel down in that area. And on that same note, we move on to Figure 2.
Can we just stay on Figure 1 for just a second?
Yes.
Just a clarifying question. So the work that's off property, on the abutting property, I know there was discussions with the property manager and ultimately the property owner. Are they aware of these proposals at this point?
Dan, question from commission member regarding your discussions with the neighboring property owner, whether they were aware of our proposals for planting and other remediation, calcite removal work in those areas.
We thought it premature to get any approval from them to do any research before that facility.
But they've been supportive of you guys carrying out these activities. They just need to be informed at some point, correct?
Correct. As mentioned before, the neighboring property at 25 Commerce Way is a little difficult to get in touch with. The airport has been very cooperative. We've been negotiating an access agreement and very easy communication, and it's going well. It's just we don't have a plan approved yet to bring to their attention.
So that's what you envision, that's what I envision as well, is, once we all agree that this is, whatever it is, the final approach
Correct.
that we're all in agreement on, at that point, you're presented to them, and
Correct.
and everyone's going to keep their fingers crossed. They simply say, sure, go ahead and do it.
Correct.
Okay.
Moving on to Figure 2. While Paul and I were out there, we evaluated the down gradient stream areas. There's a stream that has developed within the Beaver Pond area on the 25 Commerce property. And there's a stream that flows sort of around the perimeter of the airport down there as well. So the water coming from the site would flow down the hill and get into the Beaver Pond what we call the tributary stream, and then the tributary stream drains to the main stream, which is the stream that's sort of the perimeter around the airport. While we were out there, we went and collected macroinvertebrates, insects, crustaceans, leeches, all the good things from the two streams. We selected a downstream location within the main stream, an upstream location which is upgrading of any potential effect of the project. And in the tributary stream, we selected one downstream and one upstream of impact from the project. What we found is there's essentially 7 to 10 families of macroinvertebrates that we found within the stream system. They're all organisms that you would find within a somewhat impaired or impacted stream, unrelated to the site. They're just organic pollution, those kinds of things. The streams are developing. They're not well vegetated. They don't have a lot of cover. There's not really a lot of habitat features. So finding 7 to 10 different taxa in there is not unexpected. And the taxa that we found in there are basically taxa that you find in those somewhat degraded stream areas. But the good thing is there's the same numbers in all the sample locations, and the upstream numbers aren't higher than the numbers in areas that may or may not have been affected by any runoff coming off of the site. And there's no calcite within those sections of the stream channel that was observed. There's also fish and bullfrog tadpoles observed in the mainstream, the downstream sample location. The habitat conditions in the upstream and the tributary stream wouldn't support the fish or the bullfrog tadpoles anyways. The lower portion of that stream is a wider, more flooded stream. It's about 10 feet wide, a couple of feet deep. So the findings there of the macroinvertebrate study suggest that there's been no impact to the macroinvertebrate community related to the project. That's all in there. You can read the words and whatever, but basically it's an impacted system, but it's impacted for reasons other than the project. And it's actually a fairly well-rounded system covering the gamut of trophic levels of macroinvertebrates.
So your opinion is the calcite that's been transmitted into that system has done no damage?
It's done no damage to the stream system, that's correct.
What about the area outside of the streams?
It would have been within the streams. It was, if you look in area, go back to figure 1, area E, the calcite's concentrated within the stream channel. It's not really outside of the stream flow.
There appeared to be, when we've done site visits, we've observed sheet flow of calcite evidence outside of the stream areas.
That's in the upper parts, and there's an area adjacent to, there's a secondary flow in area
D.
Adjacent to area E, where there was a little bit observed. But it's mainly within areas where the water's flowing.
Have we had any water tests? Have any sample tests been completed?
I haven't.
We had requested some sample tests several meetings ago.
We had, as the board is aware, Sanborn Head and Associates had initially tested the seeps.
Yeah.
That data was provided in a prior report. In addition, in connection with the Ecotech report, there was a new sample provided by Sanborn Head of a small wet area, sort of a former dewatering basin, I think, from a prior project that was out there. My understanding is that it's non-jurisdictional. Those results are attached to the Ecotech report. They do reveal high pH in that little pond, higher pH in that little ponded area.
There was something kind of floating in between the reports, which I wasn't sure what this was, but
So that's what we refer to as the North Pond. That's on the northern portion of the property. At the furthest wall, there is a small pond there that was previously dug. I believe it was a dug pond. I was the one that was on site and requested the samples from that pond. Are we talking about the same pond?
I believe we are, yes.
Jen, you were asking a clarification, like, the very end of the Ecotech report is,
yeah, there's just some other documents, some materials that were submitted that they don't appear to be part of the Ecotech report.
Might just be extra pages.
Okay.
There should be, the Sanborn Head data should have been attached to the Ecotech report as an exhibit.
That's the alpha analytical data
Yes,
package.
yes it
right?
is, yes it is,
Okay.
yes.
My one concern about the macroinvertebrate sampling, I'm sure what you found is what you found, but the issue now is that, this occurred, I forget what the date of those photographs are, but when this system was completely coated in that material, there certainly were impacts at that point. This system has now had a lot of time to wash out, and the majority of that material isn't there in the fashion that you see it in those photos. So, I mean, there's impacts that occurred, and there are long-term impacts. So I guess I just want to make sure there was clearly an impact. You know, we have the documentation from that, and there was no sampling done at that point to see, you know, what the impacts were. There had been no prior sampling, there was nothing we could do at that time.
But
So-
if I heard Paul's sampling protocol described with regards to invertebrate, is that he took the areas where within the streams where there would have been impacts, and he sampled, he's collected his
No, I'm not questioning
downstream, but he
his-
also collected upstream.
He did, right, and I'm
And
not
if he
I'm
got
not questioning
balanced-
that. I'm just saying that when the site was completely coated in this material, when it was sort of dramatic, the color and the quantity and all of that, no one was determining what the effects were on the macroinvertebrate community at that point. So I think it's fine to say that maybe there are no long-term or lasting impacts, but that there is no impact from this.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, the words are in the report. I'm summarizing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, thank
It's
you.
more carefully worded.
Yeah, you know,
in the
and
document.
again, for the record, as Mr. Rockwood testified, that we are certainly acknowledging that there was some impacts, and in fact, we proposed a planting plan in those areas. And importantly, that we're not observing any new or different impacts now that the watering system is up and fully operational. And that's probably a good segue to hear what Kim has to say about the operation of that system, if that's acceptable to the board.
Yeah, so we're all set on this one?
Well, I mean, I think we all need to read it.
I mean, we need to have a chance to read it, and I appreciate your presentation on it, and I understand exactly what you said. Is any questions at this time?
No, I've asked the question I need to. I obviously want to digest this, but yeah, I'm fine to move on.
Deb, any questions? Deb? All right, so there's no questions right now for you, thank you. I think, have you had a chance to read the initial peer review summary and findings, the first one dated June 11th?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Would it be all right if Ms. Gravel gave her a brief
Yeah,
update?
yes, absolutely, yes.
It's because she's here. to prepare.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Good evening, my name is Kim Gravel, I'm with Lockwood Remediation. Just quickly, just to summarize the dewatering and water treatment system that's currently operational on the site. It continues to be effective in eliminating all of the seeps that were initially present. Since last time, we've had a few significant rain events, and during that time, the system was effective, and the seeps did not occur during those events or following those events, even with the higher groundwater flows that were encountered. So I think that to say that the dewatering system has been completely effective in eliminating the seeps, we can say that. In addition, the water treatment system has been able to maintain the flow rates that have been encountered following the rain events and treat the water accordingly. The discharge is clear, the turbidity is low. The average turbidity is about 7 at the moment, so very low turbidity readings, and we just continue to operate the system on a daily basis, collecting, different readings as we go, and that's really all I have to say. If you have any specific questions, then that's fine.
Is there any pH testing of the water at the outfall, when it leaves the system, to determine if it contains any,
We do. We do have data showing that it ranges, we have a set point on our system ranging between 7 and 7.5 at the effluent.
So that's what it has been showing?
Correct, on an average.
The system that's in place is not intended to be permanent, is it? The dewatering system that's currently functioning right now with the wells and the frac tanks and the sump pumps, that's not intended to be permanent, is it?
Well, at this time, I think it's going to remain permanent until other actions on the site have been completed.
Okay. So
So-
what other actions would you anticipate that would occur?
Well, I think I think a big topic of conversation tonight is going to be paving and whether or not that can occur. And the operation of the current system in place will be determinant on
Sure.
the effectiveness of the paving.
So I guess that's why I was asking about, I understand the paving is the issue.
Correct.
So that's why I was asking you all if you had read the report.
We have.
The report, GEI recommends that we allow the property to go forward with paving. So if you had seen if you have had a chance to read that report, I didn't know if you wanted to ask any questions of the consultant.
Well, I think we may have some questions for the consultant on those issues. And I think we wanted to start out with a bit of a proposal. So we just received the report yesterday. You know, we've had sort of 24 hours to review it.
Yep.
We have reached out to our experts and had a number of conversations. As you know, Paul McManus could not attend tonight. Paul Lockwood had a funeral in New Jersey, could not attend tonight. So we've been a little hamstrung in that effort. But we have put our heads together and come up with a proposal for moving forward on this. And our proposal is that there seems to be general consensus among our experts and your experts that paving the site would have an environmental benefit in reducing infiltration and water flow through the RCA that's on the site. So we would propose that we get permission this evening to proceed with paving base course on a going forward basis. We also understand and agree with the general concepts expressed in the letter that monitoring of the effectiveness of that paving and rain storage system is important, and that some additional investigation out there really to demonstrate effectiveness and to see what the effects of the paving are and whether or not the treatment system can be turned off. All of that is in order, and we agree on all of it. So our suggestion was going to be that we get an okay to proceed with paving this evening, because we all agree it's the right thing to do. And then over the next 2 weeks, our experts would sit down and meet with GEI, because the issues raised in terms of monitoring scopes of work, additional evaluation, are highly technical in nature, and I don't think we're going to touch all those bases tonight. So our suggestion would be that over the next 2 weeks, our team, including Sanborn Head, who could not be here tonight, meet with GEI, walk through the recommendations, and come up with, hopefully, a scope of work that both parties agree with in terms of future monitoring, future assessment activities, and how we're going to implement those activities in connection with the paving process out there. And then we would come back 2 weeks from tonight, after having consultation among the experts, with a plan for moving forward in terms of monitoring, maintenance, those sorts of issues, assessment, those sorts of issues.
I understand. I appreciate your position. What I was going to ask the commission to do is I was going to ask the commission to accept the report from GEI, to accept it and to annex it to the documents on the project, incorporate it by reference, and make it a part of the order of conditions. It is very likely that this commission could consider the entire site jurisdictional unless you can provide evidence that the migration of RCA not only has stopped, but won't reoccur. We, as you know, we're not very bullish on the use of RCA, and the evidence of the migration of it on the site, I think, speaks for itself. Notwithstanding the efforts that you've made to stop it, I personally think the recommendations in here are fair. I have no objection at all with your experts working with ours. That was the idea of procuring the expert to represent us in the first place. But I would like this commission to accept this report and to make it part of the documents.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
there are, while we generally agree with the concepts that are in the report in terms of future assessment, monitoring, remediation, and while we certainly acknowledge our obligation to address the leachate issues associated with the RCA, there are some things in there that we do not agree with. There's a provision at the end of the document requiring us to address and come up with a plan to address removal of the RCA from the site. I think that is very much premature. We haven't even put down a base court of pavement yet. That may not be necessary. the expenditure of time, effort, and money to address potential future RCA removal that may or may not be necessary just doesn't seem appropriate to be incorporated into an order of conditions document. Similarly, there's a provision in there that requires that we come back and get board approval before a top coat of pavement is placed on the site. While the other provisions clearly have an environmental purpose, assessing the contamination, assessing the effectiveness of the dewatering system, assessing the effectiveness of the rain stores, we can see no environmental purpose to preventing the placement of a top coat out there, when everyone seems to agree that placement of pavement is an appropriate step and generally protective of the wetland resources. We don't believe that should be in there. The scope of the hydrogeological investigation is not defined in that document, just as you're going to do a hydrogeological investigation. Again, we are happy to sit down and work out those details, but we do not believe that this sort of preliminary, just issued, we've had less than 24 hours to review a document, should be associated with the order of conditions at this point in time. And if I may, one last note. Earlier this evening, a member of the commission indicated that the placement of the RCA was in itself a violation of the order of conditions. And we don't agree with that. The provision you're referring to in the order of conditions does not reference concrete, and it does not specifically reference concrete. The concrete that we placed out here was clean concrete. There was no coating, paint, or other contamination associated with that material.
Was a place with a beneficial use determination issued for this site? It was not.
I'm not aware of BUD, but I am aware of DEP's asphalt, brick, and concrete policy, which allows for the placement of uncoated concrete.
Well,
It also
there are
requires
some
that
exceptions to that.
It also requires that under very specific requirements, and it was not met on the site, so I would say condition 73 very much holds true. And we've taken that position from the beginning, and I continue to maintain that position. I raised the same question, I had 48 hours to read the document that you had 24 on. And in many instances, I talked to specificity about those same vague statements, which in concept make sense, but need to be defined and are not yet defined. But I want to be very careful to say that I'm a firm believer in keeping the water from getting onto the surface, down through lower layers and down into the substrate and picking up this material and moving it through is something we want to stop.
We all agree.
You can cover it with tops, you can pave it, you can do lots of things. Paving is what you're proposing, and I think that's a reasonable approach, because if it's successful, you're that much closer to a permanent solution.
Agreed.
What I want to be careful of is that, having failed to demonstrate analytically and measurably with definable limits that that is in fact successful, that binder may be coming out, and maybe the concrete's coming out. Don't know yet. So to say that that precludes the possibility of putting a top course on top of a binder course, I will say just the opposite. It's not to be that. It's only to be a measure of preventing water from getting down into the substrate, as a measure of controlling that stormwater system that introduces that water down into the lower layers where this material is picked up. So that, it's that and only that.
Just to be clear, though, we agreed, and I think we're on the record at a previous meeting agreeing, that the placement of pavement would never be used as a reason not to conduct further response actions at the site. So whether it's a binder coat or a binder and a top coat.
Counselor, I heard you say not too long ago that having failed to meet other things, that it shouldn't prevent you from putting a top layer on, and I think that's where we differ. I think the presumption is that we've all 100% certain that we've captured all the water, we've prevented it from getting down, and we're preventing the transmission of water out. And because of all that, we now know that we can either modify the pump and treat system on a permanent basis or eliminate it on a permanent basis. That's yet to be defined.
But I guess I absolutely agree with you that at the end of the day, our responsibility is to address the migration of this water and any leachate from the site. I don't see how the placement or not of top coat has anything to do with that. My point was that if we put the top coat down and it's decided that an intrusive activity involving removal of that top coat is necessary, we're willing to remove it, and we'll stipulate to that.
That's not what I was hearing.
And I also,
thank you for that clarification.
Yes, okay.
Because, I mean, sure, if you want to make
Right.
Put it down in 2 layers and it turns out to be a mistake. so
Base
be it.
course or top coat, it's not going to prevent further necessary response actions. Our position, however, is that there are a range of future response actions that could be taken out here to properly address this issue to the satisfaction of all the experts in the room. It might be a permanent dewatering system. We're hopeful that the pavement itself and the rain stores addresses the issue, but it could be a permanent dewatering system. It could be a reactive wall that treats water that migrates through. There are a range of issues. This is a complicated concern, as we all acknowledge. I will admit it's not something that I've come across very much in my career, but I think there's a range of options to get at this over time, and we just don't understand the insistence on coming up with a plan to remove it at this point. Obviously, I think it's everyone's hope in this room that the pavement plan works. And if the pavement plan doesn't work, we know we have an obligation to properly address this. But there's a variety of ways to get at it, and we haven't gotten to that fork in the road yet.
I agree.
Thank you.
I was hearing you say something on the permanent.
No, I apologize if I was.
No, I apologize for not understanding it.
However, Counsel, this document is nothing to be afraid of. It's not something that stops you from completing your project. It just gives us the ability as a commission to be certain that the interests of the Wetland Protection Act and the town's bylaw are complied with. We're not trying to in any way stop the project. We're trying to get assurance and try to ensure that it's done correctly. No, as I've said in the past, I have no disrespect and no objection to anybody at your table. They do, however, work for the project. They cannot be impartial, which is why I pounded the table and asked for a consultant, and we got one. I want our consultant to work with you, because I understand that's what it's going to take. But I think the commission needs to have something that can always be superseding documents, but the commission needs to have something that it can use to direct the correction of the project. I frankly am baffled as to why you guys are arguing so strongly against removing any of the RCA off the site. There's RCA on the site that hasn't been installed yet, and all we're saying is, get rid of it, we don't want it there. And for some reason, you're digging your heels in and saying, no, we're keeping the RCA there. I mean, I don't get it. I really don't get it. If you truly were sincere about wanting to move forward, get the RCA off the site, because as far as I'm concerned, the migration of that RCA from underneath the site has made the whole place jurisdictional, in my humble opinion. And
Not humble opinion, by regulation.
Well,
that if an impact outside of jurisdiction causes an impact in jurisdiction, you extended your jurisdiction up to the impacted area.
So we want you to work with our staff, and I am gonna, and it's subject to vote. They can vote it down. I'm putting it in front of the commission.
Can we put the question to your expert for a moment before we have a vote, Mr. Chair?
You can ask any question, sure.
I raised the 2 points with the, I think there's a lot of detail to be worked out here with the 2 points. With respect to the placement of a top coat, is there an environmental reason why that would be delayed? Again, assuming that we stipulate we'll remove it if future intrusive activities are required.
Sure. The thought behind that was twofold. One, that the base course layer is acting as essentially your testing point. And then usually when a top coat goes down, obviously your final base top coat is a pretty expensive coat. It looks nice and shiny. And the hope is that before things go final, before a bunch of money is spent and, things have to get dug up, it's like, let's have a conversation. If things are controlled and everything's good, I think that would be my recommendation for things to move ahead. It's really just to kind of create that intermediate step between the testing phase and what would be considered generally a final phase.
Again, if we're taking the financial risk of that, I don't see why it would be prevented. And in terms of ongoing communication, you may not be aware of this, but we've been here every 2 weeks for a while now. There's been plenty of communication.
I'm definitely new to the table.
The other question I wanted to ask of you is, do you agree with the assertion of our experts that at the end of the day, there are a number of different ways this issue could potentially be addressed going forward, including a permanent dewatering system, a reactive wall, I'm sure a number of other approaches that I'm not mentioning. And do you agree that all those are possible?
all of those are possible, and the framework behind this is really to get through that investigation phase to understand what those remedies might be. That's the reason for the monitoring plans. That's the reason for looking at what groundwater might be impacting the RCA as it flows through. I understand that anecdotally there may not be a groundwater issue with this, but that currently is not understood. So the pathway laid out here is to get to that final piece, and it's really on the onus of the owner and the operator to kind of make that distinction of what is going to get the conditions at the site, whatever they may be at the end point, to a position where there is no longer leachate migrating to the well.
Do you agree that a permanent dewatering system could be installed here?
Yes.
And do you also agree that some additional time may help solve this issue?
I can't speak to that without additional data.
And the last question I wanted to ask you related to the sort of the end of your letter, again, speaking from memory here, but where you were asking for a plan about RCA removal. I mean, again, I don't really understand why that would be necessary at this point in time, given the continued jurisdiction of the committee and all of the efforts we're putting in terms of dewatering and pavement and everything else.
Well, there's an important point on the very end of that sentence, which is strategy for RCA removal from the property if leachate migration of the wetland cannot be controlled. That's the important piece in that statement.
Reading that entire paragraph in context, what I understand is, since we don't know what RCA that's in place is going to be taken out and what RCA is stockpiled and yet to go in place, that if we have this pavement going down and we establish a testing protocol, it might be modified or might be changed or impacted by placement of RCP, just upgrading and now moving down through where we never anticipated it moving through. We don't know where that's going to go yet.
Correct, Mr. Lynch. There's a lot of questions to answer, and I think the proponents are working through that, and that's kind of the outline of basic guidance of where this is supposed to go, is how do we understand where this is going to end up at the end of the day.
In terms of today, though, do you agree the system we have in place today is working properly?
Yeah, first, one of the statements read in my summary, absolutely, yes, it is working. And I've actually, based on the sidewalk, talking with Mr. Lockwood LRT, they had just finished dewatering after a big rain event, and they were able to maintain and keep upkeep with the rain event and not have any discharge. So I have seen under a strained condition, and it was working effectively, and I believe I've said so in my report.
Thank you, appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, could I request just a quick, less than 5-minute recess?
Absolutely.
Before you do that, because my question of Michael might be part of the discussion too. So the question was raised about pavement, permanent pavement, finished pavement, risk, financial risk, which is certainly part of the developer's forte and their responsibility. But we as a commission, we're concerned about impacts, and then if there are impacts, to mitigating those and mediating and replicating natural conditions. But what I'm hearing is the second piece of what we do at this table, and why we do it in public and why we invite in butters, is at some point we have the public interest at hand here, not just the environment's our driving force, but we also have public interest underlying all of that. And I hear finished pavement on a mixed-use development. I hear the potential for having occupants, citizens of our town living in this development with uncertainty. I hear that. So a finished pavement doesn't mean any occupancy permits. I'm feeling a little bit more secure. If finished pavement means they're going to turn a building over and start putting, selling them and putting people in them under occupancy, I got a real concern. Part of what we do is protect the interests of our citizens who aren't yet inhabiting a site that has these problems. So that, finished pavement isn't necessarily pure ecological, pure economical. There are other things that are far more subtle that I want to be clear on.
I just don't see how any of the issues we've discussed in this room have the potential to affect the site resident. And I guess I would ask GEI, I mean, if this was a finished apartment building and finished pavement, I just don't see an exposure pathway to a resident here. I mean, we will have an ongoing obligation to control
If a
groundwater
pump and treat system ends up in my back patio that I didn't know when I bought into it, I'm concerned about that. And I want to know what that looks like. So I think that's very much on the table for discussion. If finished pavement means occupancy, I think we got a problem.
Well, that wasn't our suggestion, but honestly, with all due respect, whether, a tenant's patio is impacted or not is not an issue for this commission.
To speak to your question on risk, I obviously can't answer that without a formal risk assessment being prepared. I appreciate the question.
I mean, would you agree that calcite is ingredient in over-the-counter Tums sold at every CVS in America.
Without having a risk assessment evaluation of what the calcite's doing, how it's impacting the environment, I can't answer that question.
I think we'll take our,
Do
if we may.
you want 5 minutes?
We'd like 5 minutes, yes,
Okay.
sir. Thank you.
I think, anybody object?
No.
There are no objections, Counselor.
Thank you, appreciate it.
We have no other business to do.
We have no other business. We don't have a sign we can put up in front of the camera. And so we're still broadcasting live. The mics are hot,
So no obscene comments.
and
Exactly.
And no updates.
we have no updates.
Some of us are recording.
Yeah, yeah, so, anyway, we're gonna give the applicants 5 minutes to discuss in the conference room. They'll come back in and we'll hopefully wrap it up within 5 minutes of that. There'll be some dead air time. I don't know if the CAM office can play music or something, I don't know.
Documents to sign.
The Bruins thing.
Chairman, members of
Shut
the
it off,
commission,
I thought he did.
We've discussed this offline for a few minutes, as you know, and we come back into the room and ask that you not vote this into the record as part of the order of conditions this evening. We think it creates quite a bit of legal uncertainty about amending an order of conditions. It seems like an odd way to go to make this part of the record. We are willing to commit to work with you and your experts over the next 2 weeks to see if we can come up with, and your agent, to see if we can come up with a consent order that all parties can agree to as to a way forward here. I don't think you're losing anything with that approach. You can always vote it in 2 weeks if you're unhappy with the progress we make over the next 2 weeks. We continue to believe that paving is the right way to go, and we would again ask for permission to pave this evening, with the understanding that we're going to do this over the next 2 weeks, and then we'll be back with hopefully a consent order that all parties can agree to.
Okay, let me just, let me ask you one question. The documents, we've been talking about them here at the meeting. We've made reference to them since the beginning of the meeting. So, I mean, just no, it's not like the documents don't exist. What I would suggest, meet you halfway, we'll make the documents exhibits, but not incorporate them onto the order of conditions. We'll just make them exhibits.
To the record.
To the record. In other words, just like any exhibit that's handed out at the meeting, just like the EOTech report.
Sure.
That's an exhibit. So we would take the GEI reports and accept them into the folder as exhibits, not incorporate them into the order of conditions. And we'll meet you halfway there. And I will poll the commission on paving. Let me poll the commission. Mr. Lynch.
But I, just on the first point, I would go one step further, and the interest would be exactly that, within 2 weeks, to be able to come back, understand there's some consensus of what it is that we're looking to do to be able to achieve these, all these goals in a measurable, in a concise fashion, that we can, move forward towards completion of the project. That's the goal of this, in that would be memorialized in the record, whether it's an amendment to the enforcement order, whether it's consent to that enforcement order, whatever that mechanism is. But I agree, modifying the order conditions all by itself is catastrophic. It's just not the way to go.
All right, so your opinion on paving, I need a
think
poll.
Binder, and I think, I want the record to be clear that I see no problem with binder. I would not stand in the way for the finished paving, but if this commission's being asked, or our agent's being asked to sign off on an occupancy permit, that it would be the desire of this commission to not allow that to happen.
Okay. Yep.
Agree.
Do you agree on paving?
I have no problems with putting the binder coat down. If they want to put the top coat down, they have to agree that they're willing to remove all pavement if the system doesn't work. They gotta put that in writing.
Okay, so that Doug's asking for a stipulation that if it comes to the point where you have to deconstruct any portion of the paving, you agree to do it.
Yeah, and as we've stated before in this room, if it's necessary to fix an issue and that further intrusive activity is necessary requiring pavement removal, we would remove the pavement.
This is in writing, yeah.
So, okay.
That can be part of the consent agreement.
That would be part, okay, that's fair enough. And one last thing, this is a housekeeping matter, but under the bylaw, as you know, you guys had to put up the money, the escrow money, to pay the consultant. I believe that, in furtherance of working between the parties, the consultant needs to stay online. So at some point, we're going to have to request an escrow of more money. I just want to make sure that there's going to be no objection when that happens.
Yeah, I think it will depend in some part on the amount of money, but we certainly agree that the expert needs to stay involved.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like we have an agreement. I don't hear any objections from anybody at the table. So does this require a waiver, or, a motion, or is anything that we've just done require a motion, or is the public, the discussion public?
You can make the motion. I don't know what the motion's
Well,
going
that's
to
what
be
I'm saying.
related
Is
to
it even
paving.
necessary?
Yes, because at the last meeting, you told them they couldn't pave, and they
Okay.
agreed not to pave for 2 weeks. So I think if you're allowing that, I think it would be best to have that in a motion, that
Okay.
you are voting to allow them to pave in whatever
Okay, so the
form you
motion
put
should
that
simply be
motion.
to allow the applicants to
Well,
pave.
based on them coming to agreement over the next, or prior to the next meeting, to some agreement about how further investigation to remediate these issues.
I understand that the pavement, binder pavement will be done prior to the next meeting. Very likely that will be done before the next meeting.
I'm sure they'll start it tomorrow morning.
Right, yeah, yeah. No, I'm not saying that the consent agreement needs to be done before the binder payment. I say the vote should include the binder payment and some agreement.
We
you know,
will,
to come-
we will proceed in good faith over the next 2 weeks to reach agreement
Right.
on a consent order addressing issues raised by GEI.
Yeah, I have no problem. This is a very public meeting. It's being recorded. I have no problem with council's agreement here.
So you don't want to make a vote?
I think
Was
if,
the vote to not allow paving? We need to.
We didn't
vote.
vote.
I don't believe that vote was ever
It
taken.
was just an
We
agreement.
don't need to undo anything.
we simply talked about it, and there was actually an agreement. They voluntarily
We did.
agreed not to pave.
Correct.
We didn't have to make a requirement, so this is all still part of that good faith going forward
I think it's fine.
discussion. So I'd say that we're in agreement, and you'll seek discussions with with our
So I
consultant.
just want to be clear that you're not putting any limitations on the paving, the kind of paving.
I'm not hearing limitations.
Okay.
I'm not hearing limitations, and I'm not here, what I heard was, I heard one request from Doug that was agreed to publicly by council. I don't think there's anything missing
Okay,
here.
I just want to be clear.
Okay. Are you satisfied, council?
Anything else? Yes, thank you.
So I hear no objections from any side, so sounds like we're good. Do we want to come back in 2 weeks?
Well, I think you just,
We have to. We
that
just-
was the
We
agreement.
just agreed to.
No.
If, I'm trying to be courteous here, if somebody needs more time, you know,
We agreed 2 weeks.
okay, 2 weeks.
it is.
2 weeks it is, I see it 2 weeks.
Move that we continue for 2 weeks.
Motion and a
Second.
second, all those in favor say aye.
Oh, I know.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's yes, so that's officially continued for 2 weeks. What else do you need from us, Jen?
Continue for 2 weeks.
Anything else
Just let me catch.
before we,
Commission's okay with
before we adjourn, is there anything
meeting
you need?
without any of, without me in the meeting with them. Are you guys okay with,
Do you want Amy to, when they meet, for Amy to be present?
I would think that would be excellent. I think that somebody, I would appreciate it.
okay,
I think it would be helpful for you, Amy.
I think it would be helpful for all of us, because, you know, we want you up to speed on the project, and while we have the benefit of a consultant, that, you know, I mean, let's take advantage of that. Let's take advantage of it, especially since it's being funded through the provision in the bylaw. Let's you know. All right, so, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to give it back to you for the final
boy.
motion.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
We're adjourned. Thank you.